On November 10, 1975, the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, one of the largest freighters to ever sail the Great Lakes, vanished without a single distress call. She was hauling 26,000 tons of iron ore across Lake Superior, a route sailors today still call the graveyard of the Great Lakes. As a brutal storm ripped across the lake, wind gusts reached hurricane force and waves rose over 30 feet. Nearby ships radioed that the Fitzgerald was taking whitewater over the deck, and her radar was down, vents smashed, and one of her lifeboats already torn apart by the waves. At 7:10 p.m., Captain Ernest McSorley made his final transmission. "We are holding our own." Minutes later, the 729-foot ship dropped off radar completely. When search teams managed to locate the wreck 2 days later, the bow was found buried more than 20 feet into the lake bed, showing how quick the ship plummeted through the water. The crew quarters were crushed flat, showing how violently the ship hit the bottom. So fast, the men never even reached their emergency stations. Divers later found crew hard hats still sitting neatly in their storage racks. All 29 crew members were lost, as not a single body was ever recovered. While the exact cause of the sinking still remains a mystery, many experts believe the Fitzgerald was struck by a rare Three Sisters, a set of massive rogue waves that can swallow a vessel in seconds, snapping the large ship in two and sending all 29 men to their graves 530 feet below the surface. In 1995, divers retrieved the ship's bell, the only piece ever brought to the surface, and replaced it with a memorial bell engraved with all 29 names. Every November 10th, it's rung 29 times, one toll for each life lost. Victoria Wright was born with cherubism, a rare genetic disorder that causes the bones in the lower face to grow erratically, giving her a swollen, distorted appearance that drew cruel comments from strangers her entire life. The condition can be extremely painful by tightening the jaw, straining the facial nerves, and making basic things like chewing or even speaking very difficult at times. As a child, she endured constant looks, bullying, and even adults snickering about her in public as if she wasn't standing right there. But instead of hiding, she turned her diagnosis into a mission, calling out the cruelty she faced after a BBC documentary sparked a wave of online abuse, and becoming a fierce advocate for people with facial differences. In 2015, Mary Cerruti vanished from her Houston bungalow without a trace. 2 years later, the new owners found her skeletal remains sealed inside a wall along with her glasses and shoes. Investigators believe she fell through the attic floor and became trapped, slowly dying alone in total darkness with no way of climbing out. But because she was one of the last homeowners refusing to sell as developers closed in around her, many people still suspect something darker. Her official cause of death remains undetermined. Kim Kardashian's 2018 Met Gala photo, taken in front of the gilded coffin of Nedja Monk, caught the attention of the Manhattan DA's Antiquities Trafficking Unit. When investigators looked into the artifact's paperwork, they discovered the export documents were forged and the coffin had actually been looted from Egypt in 2011. The viral photo helped trigger the investigation that ultimately exposed the trafficking network and led to the coffin being returned to Egypt in 2019. When Yoshitaro Shibasaki and his team scaled Mount Tsurugi in 1907, believed at the time to be Japan's final unclimbed peak, they were stunned to find ancient relics already waiting at the summit. A decorative metal staff fitting and a sword were discovered near the top, and later analysis revealed they'd been placed there over 1,000 years earlier. This 250-year-old mechanical swan still glides and bends its neck as if it were still alive. Built in 1773 by master showman James Cox and ingenious inventor John Joseph Merlin, the automaton uses hundreds of hidden clockwork components to make the bird preen, ripple the water below it, and even snatch a silver fish from the stream. In 1835, a man digging a duck pond in Margate, England, accidentally discovered the Shell Grotto, an underground chalk passage decorated with about 4.6 million seashells arranged across 2,000 square feet of mosaic. Most of the shells, mussels, oysters, scallops, etc., appear to have been collected from nearby Kent beaches, though some are foreign species. Its age, purpose, and creators remain completely unknown. Trailer Park Boys star Mike Smith, best known as the harmless wide-eyed Bubbles, has been charged with sexual assault in Nova Scotia for an incident that allegedly happened back in 2017, a case that stayed buried for nearly 8 years before finally surfacing in court. The identity of the victim is under a strict publication ban, but Smith is now legally barred from contacting them or going anywhere near their work, home, or school. The charge has forced him to step away from the Trailer Park Boys production company, tainting the wholesome persona millions have associated with him. Deep inside a sulfur-filled cave on the Albania-Greece border, scientists have uncovered the largest spiderweb ever recorded, an enormous 106-meter sheet stretched across the cavern's walls. Hundreds of thousands of spiders from two normally rival species have formed a massive cooperative colony, a terrifying behavior never before seen in spiders. The cave's toxic, sunless environment created a self-sustaining ecosystem powered by sulfur-eating microbes which attracted swarms of insects, which in turn supplied this spider megacity with endless food. The web is so dense and vast it looks like the cave is wrapped in ghostly white fabric, proof that life can evolve into something terrifyingly efficient when pushed into extreme conditions. Food influencer Michael Duarte, known online as Food with Bare Hands, built a massive following by grilling, cooking, and feeding strangers with his bare hands. But on November 8, 2025, his life ended in shocking fashion during a family trip to Texas. Police responded to a disturbance call involving a man reportedly acting erratically with a knife, and Duarte was fatally shot by deputies on the scene. Witnesses later described the moment as chaotic and heartbreaking, with his family present during the incident. The tragedy struck just 3 days after he and his wife celebrated their 9th wedding anniversary. In the immediate aftermath, Duarte's talent agency and family had presented his death via a GoFundMe campaign as a horrible accident, without initially disclosing police involvement. The family has since asked for privacy and support, as funeral arrangements are made and efforts to return his body to California proceed. Duarte was only 36 years old and leaves behind wife Jessica, daughter Oakley, and millions of fans who watched him turn simple meals into moments of kindness and generosity. In 2023, British TV presenter Holly Willoughby narrowly escaped a fate straight out of a nightmare. Her stalker, 36-year-old security guard Gavin Plumb, had been secretly building what prosecutors called a murder kit in his Essex home. Ropes, metal cable ties, chloroform, and knives, all carefully organized for a late-night abduction. He spent over 18 months plotting every step, obsessively saving thousands of images of Willoughby, including hundreds of deepfakes he made to fuel his fantasies. Plumb shared his entire plan with someone he met on a dark chat room called Abduct Lovers, where over 100 members spent hours trading violent fantasies. He even sent voice memos describing how they'd hit at night when traffic was low, and how he'd chloroform both of them, referring to Willoughby and her husband. But what he didn't know was that his online partner wasn't a killer, he was an undercover US federal agent. When British police stormed Plumb's apartment, they found his computer filled with explicit material, detailed kidnap instructions, and surveillance notes about Willoughby's security routines. He knew her full schedule and had even written down what time she usually woke up. In July of 2024, Plumb was sentenced to life in prison with at least 16 years before parole. In 2021, 75-year-old cyclist Dave Richards was hit by a drunk driver in Bristol, England, suffering catastrophic injuries that left him with burns across half his face, a shattered pelvis, and the loss of an eye. For years, he avoided mirrors and crowds, haunted by his own face and the looks of strangers. But in 2025, doctors at the Bristol 3D Medical Center gave him something never performed before: a 3D printed facial prosthesis that perfectly matched his skin tone, hair, and eye color. Using detailed scans of his head, they built a custom silicone replacement that restored the face he'd lost. In June of 2010, 7-year-old Kyron Horman proudly posed beside his science fair project on tree frogs at Skyline Elementary School in Portland, Oregon. It would mysteriously end up being the last photo ever taken of him. Moments later, Kyron was seen walking down the hallway toward his classroom and then upright vanished somewhere inside the school building. Despite an immediate search of every classroom, closet, and crawl space, no one ever saw him leave. When he didn't return home that afternoon, police launched one of the largest search efforts in Oregon history, combing the surrounding woods and rivers for months. His stepmother, Terry Horman, was the last person to see him alive but was never charged. 15 years later, the boy who disappeared inside his own school has never been found. In 2018, Richard Bebo Russell, a 28-year-old Horizon Air ground agent, stunned the aviation world when he quietly climbed into a Bombardier Q400 at Seattle-Tacoma Airport, started the engines from knowledge he'd picked up from YouTube and flight simulators, and took off without a license or clearance. For nearly an hour, he flew over Puget Sound, chatting calmly with air traffic control, admitting he was a broken guy while performing a full barrel roll in a 76-seat passenger plane. F-15 fighter jets scrambled to intercept him, but he refused to land, steering the aircraft away from cities before deliberately crashing it into the woods of Ketron Island. The explosion killed only him, scorched acres of forest, and exposed a massive security gap at the airport. In 2014, 43-year-old Chad Olson was reportedly texting his babysitter during movie previews when the man behind him, 71-year-old retired police captain Curtis Reeves, told him to put the phone away. The argument escalated. Olson tossed a handful of popcorn in frustration, and Reeves instantly responded by pulling a handgun and shooting him in the chest. Olson died later that day, while his wife was also injured while trying to block the shot with her hand. Despite witnesses saying Olson never got physical beyond the popcorn, a jury ultimately acquitted Reeves in 2022, accepting his claim that he fired in self-defense under Florida's Stand Your Ground law. In 2010, 77-year-old rancher and hunting expert Don Alejo lived alone on a piece of land near Ciudad Victoria, Mexico, when a local cartel began demanding that he hand over his ranch, a common tactic in the region. They suddenly gave him 24 hours to vacate the property or be killed. Alejo told them he'd think about it, but instead, when the cartel left, he prepared for war. That night, he stayed up fortifying his home. He barricaded doors, moved furniture into firing positions, and set up multiple loaded rifles and shotguns at windows facing all approaches. At dawn, several cartel trucks rolled in expecting an easy takeover, but instead, the gunmen walked straight into a one-man ambush. From inside the house, Don Alejo opened fire with military-level precision. The firefight lasted nearly an hour, and by the time authorities arrived, they found 4 cartel members dead and at least 2 more critically wounded. The house was torn apart by gunfire, and Don Alejo was found inside, killed by return fire, still clutching his shotgun. Mexican Marines who processed the scene later said it was obvious he knew he wouldn't survive. He had prepared it as a final stand. Don Alejo's ranch was never taken by the cartel, and he became a national symbol of defiance in a region where most people are too terrified to fight back. Scientists in Germany have captured something incredible on camera for the first time ever. They recorded wild rats snatching bats straight out of the air in total darkness, an unbelievable hunting behavior no one had documented before. Since rats have poor eyesight, they rely on their highly sensitive whiskers to detect subtle changes in air pressure and movement, even the faint air currents from a bat's wings. Researchers believe this eerie adaptation is what allows them to hunt in complete darkness, and the finding may also help explain why bat-borne illnesses like coronaviruses are spilling over into rodent populations. Deep in the Guyanese rainforest, Kayatur Falls is nearly 4 times taller than Niagara. Its remote location means few people ever get to see it, and the surrounding cliffs host rare species found nowhere else on Earth. Beautiful, ain't it? NASA's New Horizons spacecraft captured this amazing footage of Pluto during its flyby in 2015, revealing frozen plains, towering ice mountains, and an unexpectedly active surface. The footage offered the first close-up look at Pluto in human history, and completely changed our understanding of the distant dwarf planet. During the filming of Sinister in 2012, the chilling home video scene showing a family being hanged nearly turned into a real-life tragedy. The stunt used actual harnesses and cables to simulate the hangings, but on the very first attempt, something went horribly wrong. One stunt performer slipped from their foot stirrups, causing the harness to immediately tighten around their neck. They were briefly severely choked before the crew had to cut them down, leaving everyone on set horrified as they'd almost witnessed an actual hanging. Director Scott Derrickson immediately shut down production, fired the stunt coordinator on the spot, and later admitted it was one of the scariest moments of his career, as a scene that was meant to terrify audiences had almost claimed a real life. In 1996, Karen Wetterhahn, a respected chemistry professor at Dartmouth, accidentally spilled just a few drops of dimethylmercury onto her latex gloves while conducting an experiment. The liquid seeped through in seconds, but she didn't know it, and for months she felt perfectly healthy. But then her speech began to slur, her balance faltered, and tests revealed her body contained 80 times the lethal dose of mercury. As the poison attacked her nervous system, she slipped into a coma, paralyzed but still aware, before dying 10 months after the accident at just 48 years old. In 2008, 18-year-old Joshua Maddox left his home in Woodland Park, Colorado for a short walk and was never seen again. 7 years later, his mummified body was discovered inside the chimney of an abandoned cabin less than a mile from his house. He was found in a fetal position wearing only a thermal shirt with his other clothes neatly folded nearby. The coroner ruled his death an accident, suggesting he tried to enter the cabin through the chimney and became trapped. But the bizarre details, his position, the missing clothing, and the fact that the chimney was blocked off from the inside have fueled theories that Joshua didn't end up there by accident but was placed there by someone else. In 1930, a mannequin appeared in the window of a bridal shop in Chihuahua, Mexico, so lifelike that locals swore she wasn't made of wax at all. Her glass eyes, detailed hands, and visible veins fueled rumors that she was the embalmed body of the shop owner's daughter, a bride who died on her wedding day. Nicknamed La Pascualita, she's remained on display for nearly a century, still leaving visitors to wonder if they're looking at a mannequin or a corpse in a wedding dress. On Halloween morning in 2025, former TV news anchor Angie Mock was arrested in Wichita, Kansas, after allegedly stabbing her 80-year-old mother Anita to death inside their home. When police arrived, Mock was reportedly covered in blood with cuts all over her hands, while her mother was found deceased in bed with multiple stab wounds. Dispatch audio captured Mock claiming she stabbed her mother to save herself, though no evidence has yet explained what that meant. The once trusted newswoman, who had anchored for Fox 2 St. Louis, is now charged with first-degree murder and held on a $1 million bond. In 1998, Thai pop star Ruangsak Loichasak boarded Thai Airways Flight 261 and took seat 11A. Moments later, the plane crashed, killing 101 people on board, but Ruangsak miraculously survived, earning himself the nickname Iron Bones. Nearly 27 years later, history repeated itself when an Air India flight went down in 2025, and once again, the sole survivor was seated in 11A. Ever since, that seat number has become one of the fastest to sell out, since customers believe it will give them a higher chance of survival if the plane happens to crash. As a teenager, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's family was struggling so badly that they were evicted from their apartment in Hawaii. Not long afterwards, Johnson witnessed something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. His mother stepped out of her car on a busy highway and began walking towards oncoming traffic. Luckily, Dwayne sprinted after her and pulled her back just before she was hit. Years later, he revealed that the incident was a suicide attempt brought on by their dire situation, saying he never forgot how powerless he felt in that moment. In 2008, 39-year-old Stefan Miller was helping his cousin, Hollywood animal trainer Randy Miller, film a promo video with their 700-pound grizzly bear named Rocky, the same bear that starred alongside Will Ferrell in Semi-Pro that same year. But in an instant, the trained bear turned deadly. Without warning, Rocky suddenly lunged and bit deep into Stefan's neck, crushing his spine and severing an artery. He bled out within minutes as horrified crew members looked on. The bear, raised in captivity and for years considered to be safe, proved that even the most well-trained predator can revert back to its instincts in a heartbeat. Neil Peart, legendary drummer of the band Rush, lived through a series of devastating personal tragedies. In 1997, his 19-year-old daughter Selena died in a single-car accident while driving to college. Less than a year later, his wife Jackie succumbed to cancer, though Peart later described it as dying of a broken heart. To cope with the losses, he took a 55,000-mile motorcycle journey across North and Central America to cope with his grief. Though he eventually returned to music and remarried, Peart later died in 2020 after a private battle with brain cancer. In 1991, 25-year-old Gregory Green stabbed his pregnant wife to death and spent 16 years behind bars for the crime. After his release, he married the daughter of a pastor who helped him earn parole and started a new family in Michigan. But in 2016, history repeated itself in a scene far more horrifying. Green tied up his wife, shot her 2 children from a previous marriage, then poisoned and suffocated their 2 young daughters, ages 4 and 5. When police arrived, they found his children dead and his wife bound and bleeding in the basement. Green calmly surrendered, telling officers, "I just killed my family." He later pled guilty to 4 counts of murder and was sentenced to 100 years in prison, ensuring he'll never get a second chance again. Here's some extremely rare footage of a pilot flying straight into the eye of Hurricane Melissa. The eye forms when a hurricane becomes powerful enough to organize itself. A calm circular zone in the center where air actually sinks instead of rising. While the surrounding eye wall is a violent ring of wind and rain, the eye can be eerily clear and still, sometimes even letting sunlight through. This is the only known footage of the extremely rare box jellyfish known as Chirodectes. Captured off the coast of Papua New Guinea, this was only the second ever sighting of the species in recorded history. Draining glyphosate into a container looks like a glitch in the Matrix, but it's actually a laminar flow effect, where the liquid moves so smoothly it appears frozen in place. Here's some extremely rare footage of a snow leopard caught on a trail cam in the wild. These elusive predators are known as the ghosts of the mountains for a reason. So few humans ever catch a glimpse of them that even wildlife experts can spend years tracking one without success. They live high in the remote peaks of Central Asia, blending in perfectly with the jagged, icy terrain, where temperatures often plummet below zero and oxygen is scarce. Their thick, spotted coats act as camouflage against the rocks and snow, making them nearly invisible even when they're just a few feet away. The murder of 6-year-old beauty queen JonBenét Ramsey is one of the most baffling cases in American history, and the details are far darker than most people realize. On Christmas night in 1996, her parents found a bizarre 3-page ransom note demanding $118,000, the exact amount of her father's recent bonus, written on paper from inside their own home. Hours later, JonBenét's father reportedly discovered her body in the basement, strangled with a homemade garrote made from one of her mother's paintbrushes, her skull fractured, and her wrists loosely tied as if staged. There are also signs of possible sexual trauma, suggesting she may have been assaulted before or after death. Meanwhile, the autopsy revealed partially digested pineapple in her stomach, even though her parents claimed she went straight to bed that night. A bowl of pineapple with her brother Burke's fingerprints was later found on the kitchen table. There were no footprints in the snow outside, suggesting the killer never entered or left the house. Police later learned the basement window was already broken and the family never fixed it. The most popular theory today is that JonBenét was accidentally killed by her older brother Burke during a sudden outburst, possibly over the pineapple, and that their parents staged the ransom note and crime scene to protect him. This theory, while never proven, explains many of the inconsistencies in the evidence. But despite massive media attention, DNA tests, false confessions, and countless theories involving intruders, cover-ups, and family secrets, no one has ever been charged. Nearly 30 years later, the case still remains unsolved. In 2021, escapologist Jonathan Goodwin attempted one of the most dangerous stunts ever filmed for America's Got Talent Extreme, but it went catastrophically wrong. Suspended in a straitjacket between 2 swinging cars rigged to explode, the timing malfunctioned and the vehicles slammed together with him still in between before he plummeted more than 30 feet to the ground. The impact severed his spinal cord, shattered both legs and shoulder blades, destroyed a kidney, and left him permanently paralyzed. He was airlifted from the set in critical condition, underwent multiple surgeries, and spent months hospitalized before being discharged in early 2022. Now confined to a wheelchair for life, Goodwin has described the incident as a miracle of survival. The next year, Goodwin filed a lawsuit against NBC Universal and others, accusing them of negligence, inadequate safety protocols, and a production that valued spectacle over human life. The filing claims the stunt was rushed, chaotic, and staffed by a team that lacked the necessary expertise, and that Goodwin will be wheelchair-bound for the rest of his life because of it. In one of the most disturbing cases ever shown on My Strange Addiction, a Tennessee woman named Casey developed a heartbreaking obsession after her husband Sean died suddenly from an asthma attack. Stricken with grief, she began carrying his urn everywhere, talking to it, sleeping beside it, and treating it like her husband was still alive. One day, when some of the ashes accidentally spilled on her hand, she instinctively licked them off, and soon enough became addicted to doing it deliberately. She admitted to eating the ashes up to 5 times per day, worried that if she ever stopped, she'd truly lose him forever. The ashes reportedly tasted like sand and rotten eggs, but she couldn't resist the rare feeling of closeness it gave her. Over time, she eventually consumed nearly a pound of her husband's remains, until appearing on the show finally made her realize how far her grief had gone. After filming, Casey entered therapy and eventually stopped consuming the ashes, keeping his urn nearby as a reminder of love rather than loss. Here's a clip of a blonde raccoon and her babies on an unlikely adventure. Caused by a rare genetic mutation found in less than 1 in 10,000, her pale fur makes her easy prey in the wild, making it extremely rare to find a blonde raccoon that reached adulthood. 6 years ago, a farm donkey named Diesel went missing in Wyoming. He was just recently found living amongst a herd of elk, and now he's one of them. Experts call it highly unusual for a donkey to form such a deep bond with a completely different species, relying on them for both companionship and survival. Since he appears safe and content, officials decided to let him stay with his adopted elk family. Photographer Nicholas Escarot captured incredible footage of red sprites, massive bursts of electricity that flicker high above thunderstorm clouds. They last less than 1/10 of a second, growing crimson in the upper atmosphere and appearing as a brief alien invasion. In 1930, engineers pulled off one of the strangest construction feats in U.S. history, rotating an entire 22 million pound building while people were still working inside. The Indiana Bell Telephone Building in Indianapolis was turned 90 degrees over a month, inching along at just 15 inches per hour. Nearly 600 employees continued answering phones as the 8-story structure quietly pivoted on hydraulic jacks. Gas, water, and electricity all stayed connected, and not a single day of service was lost. In 1996, 31-year-old Canadian man Blair Adams suddenly became convinced someone was trying to kill him. He abruptly withdrew his life savings, emptied his safety deposit box of gold, cash, and jewelry, and made several frantic but failed attempts to leave the country. After being denied entry to the US, he inexplicably abandoned his construction job in Vancouver, flew to Washington, D.C., rented a car, and began driving aimlessly across multiple states. Witnesses described him as paranoid and agitated, constantly checking over his shoulder and telling strangers someone was after him. Days later, his naked body was found in a Knoxville, Tennessee parking lot, his clothes torn and scattered around him, along with $4,000 in cash, gold, and jewelry, none of it stolen. An autopsy revealed he had sustained many cuts and abrasions consistent with a struggle, and a violent blow had ruptured his stomach, causing sepsis and eventually death. Yet there was no weapon found, no DNA evidence pointing to a killer, and his car keys were found tossed under a nearby vehicle. Hotel staff recalled him pacing in the lobby the night before as if waiting for someone. Nearly 3 decades later, Blair Adams' death remains one of the most baffling unsolved cases in North America. Sports Broadcasting Hall of Famer Marv Albert, long known as the voice of basketball, was one of the most recognizable play-by-play commentators in NBA history. But in 1997, his career nearly collapsed after he was convicted of forcing a woman to perform oral sex on him. Evidence included bite marks matching his teeth and semen found at the scene. Another woman accused him of assault after arriving at his hotel room to find him wearing only silk panties and a garter belt. Albert pled guilty to assault and battery, was fired from NBC, and vanished from broadcasting, only to return less than 2 years later. Despite it all, he went on to call games for decades, still celebrated as one of the sport's most iconic voices. In 2007, 19-year-old Michael John Anderson from Minnesota lured a woman to his home using a fake Craigslist ad for a babysitting job. When 24-year-old Catherine Olson arrived, he shot her in the back, dragged her bleeding body down a staircase, and stuffed her into the trunk of a car, which he later abandoned. When questioned, Anderson chillingly confessed that he killed her simply because he was bored and wanted to know what it felt like. This was the final footage of Sandra Cantu before she was brutally murdered by someone everyone trusted. In 2009, 8-year-old Sandra Cantu vanished from her trailer park in Tracy, California after heading out to play. While police suspected a male predator who had touched Sandra before, the real killer was someone nobody expected. 28-year-old Sunday school teacher Melissa Huckabee, whose daughter was Sandra's friend. When Sandra went missing, Huckabee immediately inserted herself into the case, texting Sandra's mother strange messages about something being stolen at the exact time Sandra disappeared, and even claiming she found a note describing Sandra locked in a suitcase and tossed in the water. But witnesses had already seen her near an irrigation pond that same day, looking frantic and making a flimsy excuse that she had to pee before speeding off. Surveillance footage soon sealed her fate, showing Sandra walking toward Huckabee's trailer at 3:54 p.m., and Huckabee's SUV leaving the area just 8 minutes later. Police searched the church where she taught and found a rolling pin with a bent handle and a smear of Sandra's blood. Investigators believe Huckabee drugged Sandra, beat her up, sexually assaulted her with the rolling pin, then smothered and strangled her before stuffing the body into a suitcase and dumping it in the pond where it was recovered 10 days later. The seemingly trustworthy Sunday school teacher never explained why she killed her. Prosecutors suspect a twisted Munchausen-style urge for attention, someone willing to murder an innocent child just to make herself part of the tragedy.